Dr. Paul Conti.
Paul Conti, MD.
Dr. Paul Conti.
I think often substance abuse is dealt with and thought of as an illness, and in a way the responsibility is kind of taken away. I'm wondering what powers that in people, why there's such a strong synergy between substance abuse and trauma.
Trauma paves the way to substances. So it's our responsibility and for the societies around us that we don't accept the appeal of the short-term soothing.
Intergenerational trauma, so for example, the trauma of the Jewish people and the Holocaust kind of gets passed on.
Children, for example, of Holocaust survivors had higher levels of anxiety, and traumas that are perpetuated during wartime have been seen mostly through a criminal lens. But now that the conception has shifted to say that trauma can affect that person not only for the rest of their lives, but it can affect their children.
I want to move it on if that's okay with you.
Sure.
And it's playing on the concept of responsibility to the linking of trauma and substance abuse. And the reason I'm linking it back is because I think often substance abuse is dealt with and thought of as an illness, and in a way the responsibility is kind of taken away. But I know that for me personally, I've used alcohol in the past in my life to not think about certain issues, and I'm wondering kind of what powers that in people, why there's such a strong synergy between substance abuse and trauma, and where our responsibility lies, again, in a similar way to trauma, to step in and take action ourselves.
Sure. The framing of substance dependence as an illness, with modern brain science, does make sense. So you see if someone is using alcohol excessively, the brain is changing, right? And then there's a pervasiveness of the pattern, but it does not take away responsibility. So like earlier, diabetes was referenced. Okay, like we clearly understand diabetes is an illness, but that doesn't mean the person is then not responsible for taking care of themselves. In fact, if you have diabetes, you have to take care of yourself in certain ways, right, in order to stay alive, right, let alone to move forward through life healthily. So we can identify illness processes in us, and that is not only not delinked to responsibility, but it is linked to responsibility. Probably all of us should watch our diet and our sugar intake like people do when they have diabetes and they're taking care of their diabetes. We all have that responsibility, but the diabetes pushes to the forefront the responsibility. So I think the same is true with substances, and there's such a strong link between substances and trauma, because substances, as you said, to forget about things, right? Substances, they seduce us into soothing in the moment, right? So seduction is like anything that kind of lures you in like this in a nice way, but there's a hammer behind the back, right? So seduction will say, hey, don't you want to feel better right now? I mean, don't you want to not have social anxiety right now? Don't you want to forget about that thing you want to forget about right now? I mean, there's the alcohol in front of you, right? So in the short term, if we just look at it this way, the substances are making a strong argument, right? But we are responsible for looking beyond that and to say, right, what that really is like is, borrow $1 or borrow £1 today to pay 20 back tomorrow. Like, that's not a good bargain. If someone says, do you want £1 today? Okay. You want to pay 20 back tomorrow? Now I don't want that anymore, right? So it's our responsibility, and for the societies around us to which we all contribute, to foster seeing ourselves across time, valuing and respecting ourselves enough that we don't accept the appeal of the short-term soothing. As I say, I've said many, many times, I've never met anyone in about a quarter century of doing this who they are having a problem with drugs or alcohol. And I ask them why, and they say, life was kind of going okay, and I just thought it might be good to wreck it. I mean, no one says that, right? So how do people come across these problems? Sometimes it's not an understanding of genetics. There are genetics for alcohol dependence that say, oh, certain people should stay very, very much away from alcohol. It affects people in different ways and is much more addictive. I mean, there are ways we can become dependent upon substances, but the primary way that I have seen over and over and over again, and anyone who works in the field sees this, is that trauma paves the way to substances. Right. And AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, I know it's different. It's AA is the Auto Association, right, in the UK, right? I think
I wouldn't know that.
I think it was. It might be. In the US, it's AAA, AAA for your car, right? AA is Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm just referencing the group. So of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is, very much against substances. There was a period of time when even the people who are in the founding roots of AA were sending people for psychedelic treatment, right? And so think about that. They were sending people for LSD treatment at the time. It was being done in Canada, and many, many people were getting better. They were seeing there were people who were not getting better with regular treatment and going to AA, and they were heading towards their life being destroyed or heading towards death. And they were referred for psychedelic treatment, which was hugely helpful to many of them. Why is that? Because they were processing trauma in that way, right? I mean, we see many, many signs. That's just one of them.
What do you think psychedelics do, and why do they help us process our trauma? What's the role of them there as opposed to other substances which can be inimical and negative?
Sure. The difference is when using anything that goes into us, so let's say a substance, the question would be, are we intoxicated by it? Right? Meaning, is there something toxic going on inside of us? It's unhealthy for us. And part of the toxicity is that it skews our judgment, right? I can still remember, how many times a friend and I, who used to drink a bit excessively together many years ago, how many times did we decide we were going to write a novel together? Right? How many times did we write the first 5 words and we were going to finish it the next day? Of course, that never happened. Why? Because in a state of intoxication, we're somewhat euphoric and had all sorts of ideas that weren't rational ideas. This is why you can't drive when you're drunk. We can't engage in judgment. We're intoxicated, right? Whereas psychedelic substances or psychedelic medicines used judiciously, and that's a hugely important point, right? They do not engender intoxication. In fact, quite the opposite. They engender truth and insight that people then can keep with themselves after the medicine has had its impact upon them. And there is, I believe, tremendous impact. The neuroscience of psychedelic substances tell us that the impact of it is more like what I would have thought would be science fiction. Like, it is so amazing, the changes that are created in our brains and how those changes lead us away from the sort of human doing of everything bouncing around in our outer cortex of seeing, hearing, talking, planning, all the things that are about survival. And those medicines put us in the deeper parts of our brain that are about existence and truth. So again, they can be dangerous if not respected and used in the right set and setting. But when that's the case, they help us heal, which is why from 100 years ago, all the way through the present, we understand in Western society, we understand far, far longer than that in society, some non-Western societies, but we see that these substances can come at trauma. That's what they do. And if we come at trauma, we make ourselves healthier. So I think in many ways, the psychedelic revolution, the understanding now is part and parcel of a revolution in understanding trauma. The two go hand in hand, each shedding light upon the other and each bringing hope and the reality, when people make certain decisions, the reality of healing.
Ever shown up to the beach with a big bush, getting rejected left, right and centre, so you have to walk away with your pubes between your legs? Then get yourself a Manscaped and rule the beach. Wear your shorts with no shame. Get the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra now with a discount code LOAF to get a full 20% off, so that your baguette leaves no crumbs.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the clip from our interview with Dr. Paul Conti. Drop a like and subscribe for more content. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment down below. If you'd like to check out the full interview, you can click right here. Stay tuned for more.